Okay, Kevin,
I,
you want to dedicate this year?
yes, I want to dedicate this year to a relative of mine by the name of Stan Hart, who passed away last night in London, and his funeral was about an hour ago, finished an hour ago. Damon met them on numerous occasions in Durban, and he knows his son Darren and the widow now Bernice, wonderful people who contributed to the Durban community, and Stan, like someone with no hidden agendas, no transparent, just giving and of his time, and just a friendly, jolly fellow, and who was a kind person and had time for everybody, and he'll be missed. And so I just want to say, dedicate this for him, for his neshama, and that the family has only celebrates only simchas and has comfort at this time. So Damon, just for about a minute, so just stop me after about a minute, 2 minutes. I just want to say something about spirits. We are now during the period of Svirah, in between Pesach and Shavuot, and we count 49 days, and there's certain rules that apply to the counting and to the actual period, where one shouldn't, if possible, have haircuts, shave, listen to music, listen and be joyous. And people don't actually have simchas during this time. They don't have simchas, but the exception is obviously a bris or an engagement, but they shouldn't. Usually there's no entertainment there. But I just want to mention one thing, because time is short, just on the
I want to ask one question on this as well when you finished. Just a quick question.
Okay. So on the counting, so we count basically if it says here on the OU website, if one forgot to count. So it says here, if one forgot to count at night, he or she repeats the count the following day without a brocha, and then resumes counting with the blessing the following that night. If one forgets to count in the daytime as well, it's wait till next year time as far as counting with the brocha is concerned, but one should continue to count on subsequent nights without a brocha. If one is unsure whether one counted, the nightly count should be continued with a brocha. And it says here also, one other thing here, it says here, can we set a reminder for the count? So basically what people will say in shul, and I'll finish with this, before they do the count for that particular, they'll say, last night we counted, and I can say it for you guys. Can I say it for you guys if you haven't counted?
Yeah.
So last night we actually counted 13. Okay, so don't say it yet without the brocha if you've been counting. So that's what they usually say in shul. That's what they said in shul tonight. Just to remind people, because you can forget something simple like that, what the correct day it is to announce. Okay.
All right. Thank you. That was very good. Can I ask a quick question on the same point? That's why.
I'll try answer it, otherwise Damon may.
No. I'm opening this to Damon as well, because quite a big question, and I just don't know what the answer is. I'm hoping one of you have come across it. How come we're allowed to count the Omer and we can't count anything else? We're not allowed to count people. We can't count anything, but we can count the Omer.
Because it's. Damon, answer if you answer me if I give the incorrect answer, because we're anticipating Shavuot, so you're counting up towards it, and you don't do a countdown like 49, 48, 47. We count up towards it because it's
I understand that, but why don't you say every day?
Yeah, you're right. You don't count people because it's people. Because people, it's not people.
Simple answer.
It's not people. I think that's a good answer.
Yeah, because exactly that. It doesn't matter if you count up or count down. Either way, you could make the counting conducive to non-deduction. The reality is you cannot limit a person by just the number of who they are. So there's two concepts. There's the concept of the part and the whole, meaning the world was created for an entire person, and the universe is perceived through him, meaning he's the entire universe in and of himself. And yet he has to remain humble and realize that even a mosquito was made before him, and he's a cog in the wheel of the Jewish people, and he has to have responsibilities within the world in order to contribute to the world. And the world is not there just to serve him, but he's there also to serve the world. By the same token, he can't negate his personality to the degree where he's just another cog in the wheel, because then you'll end up with North Korea. So it's a fact of not quantifying somebody, because it's an iron horror, that sometimes when you count your money or you count a person, it actually has a negative effect. So that's why when we count, we say not one, not two, because we don't want to bring a negative effect by quantifying and therefore limiting somebody's neshama by just a statistical anomaly to be added to a group of millions of people where they're just another number, because no person is just another number. Just like their fingerprint is unique, their contribution is unique. And it's not the non-Jewish concept of billions of people where there's just statistical irrelevance. That's why.
That's a good answer. Give me 1 second. I just got to
And I just want to put a pair of shorts on. Just putting the screen down. One sec.
No, you can't tonight. I'm doing the first part. I can't show it all. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for letting me know. Yeah, thanks, Brian. Catch you later. Sorry.
No problem. Okay, I hope that might have addressed your issue as to why we don't.
Yes. No, absolutely. I kind of was thinking along those lines of like people, kind of what was, I had the more simplistic answer that Kevin had, which I was thinking is probably because the one's more people related, but you gave a more verbose answer, more detailed.
Sorry about it. It's just a bit too hot. I've just contracted. Thank you.
I hope it wasn't verbose from the point of it being unnecessary or waffling.
No. So that's probably the wrong word. Not verbose. That's the wrong word.
No, Damon, because
no, you elaborated. Sorry, you elaborated.
Yes, that's fine, and you gave a good yes.
Sorry, I used the wrong word. My English is not so good, Damon. It's only my first language. That's why.
Okay, so I'll tell you where we ended off yesterday. A very, very simple point is that we wanted to know if there was a third party involved, like you're living in KwaZulu-Natal and you're a thief and you stole dye from party A, Ruvain, and then you stole wool from Shimon, and then the monkey came and used the two ingredients in your garage and dyed the wool, but those two ingredients you stole, but the monkey is a wild monkey. What's your level of liability? And the question arose from before. We said that if you actually dye wool, does it improve it tangibly with regards to the financial value, or is aesthetics in and of itself a value aside from the financial value? Or perhaps when you combine the dye and the wool, the dye itself is insignificant in terms of raising the cost of the wool, of what you would have to compensate. Well, certainly you'd have to return to the original owner, but do you have to return the dye? And according to Russia, of course, the financial equivalent is sufficient, but the actual dye itself. So what we did from there, and this was a discussion brought by Ravina, is we attempted to resolve it from a Mishnah. And that Mishnah was in Ola chapter 3, verse 1. And it was talking about that if you have a garment dyed with the peels of Ola fruit, and they must be set afire. What does that mean? Is that they must be burnt. You can't derive any benefit from it. So obviously, if you dye a fabric and then you cannot derive any benefit from it, because the Ola fruit is a tree within the first 3 years, the fruit, the peels, as well as the byproduct, with the exception obviously of the bark and the shells, they cannot be used for the first 3 years. So if you use it, you cannot derive any benefit. So that's why it's burnt. So we want to know, is it the appearance that is considered a significant factor? In other words, something present in the fabric, and that's why we burn it. And then that would obviously relate to our Mishnah to figure out if the wool that had dye ingredients in it was significantly affected by seen as an improvement, or is it a non-factor with regards to the financial improvement apart from the aesthetics. So the point was rejected according to Rava, because basically, as far as respect to Ola is concerned, the Torah explicitly prohibited a benefit that is visible to the eyes, meaning it's a visible benefit, but it's been taught in a brisa that the verse states with respect to the Ola prohibition, fruits shall be forbidden to you. they shan't be eaten. But only from that, when you're reading the pasuk, do you think that it's forbidden to eat the fruits. How do we actually know that it's forbidden to derive other sorts of benefits? So you go to Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 23, where it says, when you come to the land and you plant any food tree, you shall treat its fruit as forbidden. For 3 years they shall be forbidden to you. They shall not be eaten. So if you say that, why you keep using the word forbidden? There's a triplication of the word, okay? And what we learn from there from Rashi is that it has 3 forms of prohibitions. One is general benefit for eating. The second one is used as a dye. And the third one is fuel for a lamp. So in that particular case, it includes all those prohibitions. So whether or not there's a significant factor with regards to the appearance, or it's got some sort of financial benefit because the garment is now worth more, is actually an irrelevant factor. You just can't get the benefit. So whether so it has absolutely nothing to do with the improvement of the garment or whether it's part of the fabric. So therefore, that can't prove our particular case in the Gemara with regards to dye ingredients and wool stolen by a thief. Now, Kevin brought up a point yesterday, and he was saying, well, are we talking about third-party claimants with regards to the olive fruit? It had nothing to do with that. All we said, Kev, is that the olive fruit was trying to prove that if you use those peels to dye a garment, that it's that significant factor. In other words, something present in the garment that is the reason you burn it, because it obviously looked as though it was different. And the fact of it is, whether you can see the difference or not, whether it has a financial implication or not, either way, because it's prohibited, you burn it. So that doesn't prove one way or the other. In fact, Tosfot brings a commentary further and said, look, you can't teach this as a rule, that as proof that dye is not considered something material in the wool. Because either way, we're not sure, according to Tosfot, if the verse means to teach that the Ola is an exception to the general rule, or whether it serves as a source for a more general rule that dye, in fact, is something material in the wool with respect to all Torah law. So we're saying the Ola fruit, we don't know if it's an exception or sets the tone for the rule. And since we don't know either way, we can't use this as the basis for developing our thesis. So now we're going to attempt another proof from a different brisa. And it says a garment that was basically, just hang on a second. I just want to put the share on pause a second. Just give me a second, guys. Okay. Thank you, Kevin, for your Gemara book. So, so we had to learn a proof from the following brisa that a garment that was dyed with the peels of Shemitah produce must be set afire. So now we're not dealing with the Ola produce, we're dealing with the Shemitah produce. So obviously, it says in Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 25, verse 1 to 8, that in the land of Eretz Yisrael, it must be left uncultivated every 7th year. So that's known as Shavuos, literally the 7th or the Shemitah year. So anyway, guys, produce that grows wild during this year can be picked and eaten. That's what you got to know. It's only man-made produce or crops that can't be eaten. It's obviously subject to various restrictions. One of those restrictions on wild-grown produce is that there is a prohibition on doing business with these fruits. And that's brought in Avodah Zorah in the 62nd daf. Okay. You just see where I lost Arthur exactly. Arthur, at what point did I lose you?
No, you're talking about the Shemitah years, so you just got cut off there.
Okay, so with the Shemitah year, Arthur, man-made crops you can't get benefit in the 7th year, but you can if it grows naturally without man-made intervention. But there are certain prohibitions. Okay.
Okay.
So it's in Vayikra chapter 25, verse 1 to 8. One of them is brought in the Gemara of Order Zorah 62a, that you can't do business with those fruits, meaning you can't sell them commercially. Or when it says doing business, use it for certain activities. And then there's another requirement, is to remove Shemitah produce from one's possession once it's no longer available in the fields for the animals to forage. Okay? So, in other words, at the point where it's all eaten and there's nothing left, or it's the point where that particular crop, that natural foliage dies, you can't possess it. So it's known as bi'ur, which is removal, and that's a requirement. So obviously Rashi makes a note here that the reference is only to the peels and shells of that produce, not the bark of the trees. It's the same with the olive fruit, is that it's the fruit, the peels and the shells, but the bark is not prohibited. Okay, so as far as that's concerned, if you're dying with the peels of the Shemitah produce that must be set on fire, which means you can't get benefit, it's saying here, then let's try it. If you can't try it with Ola, let's use the proof from Shemitah produce. And this is proving that the appearance is considered something substantial. Okay. So what we're trying to do is ask a question and say, is in fact that the case? Now, just to bring one or 2 points, is that with regards to this forbidden, using the produce in a forbidden way to do business that grew during the Shemitah year, it's also included against dyeing a garment with them. Because when it says forbidden for business, it means that it outlives its expectancy to get rid of it with bi'ur. Because when you eat it, you get rid of it because it goes through your body. If you dye a garment, it has a permanence to it. So that's considered, obviously, apart from the commercial trade of dyeing, it's considered that you're extending its lifespan, so to speak. And that's why the dye prohibited is prohibited for benefit. Do you get what I'm saying? That's why you've got to burn it. So that's the issue. One of the reasons why it's forbidden to do business with the Shemitah produce, and it took a while for me to understand, is that what's happening there is you're taking the Shemitah, it's not the Shemitah crop, by the way, guys, it's just what's natural foliage within that Shemitah year, and you're selling it. Now, that minute that sale becomes money, then you don't remove that money by simply getting rid of it, by throwing it away. You've transferred ownership of the produce and gotten money. So you've created the permanence. That's why you're forbidden to do business with it. Because the money that you receive from it acquires Shemitah sanctity itself. And that has to be removed from your possession at the time of removal. And we all know that if you then use the money to buy other goods, that Shemitah sanctity then transfers to the money, to the goods that you bought with those goods. So in other words, when they say it's forbidden to do business, it means the purpose of doing business is what? To accumulate assets or wealth. And therefore the Shemitah produce never goes away. It just transfers into its different states. And you're not allowed to keep that Shemitah beyond the time of removal, whether it's converted into financial profits or those profits are spent into another asset. And in the same vein, Rashi said that the prohibition against doing business with Shemitah encompasses a prohibition against dyeing as well. Why? Because dye by its very nature is not consumed prior to the time of removal. Why do you dye something? Because you want it to stay. So it's intended to remain in the garment of one's possession even after that time. So that's why it's prohibited to dye with it. Now, certain dyes are not subject to removal. In other words, there are plants, you've got what you call plants that are seasonal and perennial plants, etc. And in Shavuos chapter 7, verse 2, plants that are always available in the field, year in, year out, and don't get consumed by the animals necessarily, or are only there for a season. Those plants you can dye with, because they don't get affected by Shemitah. It's not your intervention that's caused the flourishing of that plant. It is always there. and therefore selling that, transferring to money and keeping the money or another asset or dying with that particular produce has not been in contravention of Shemitah rules. So we're wanting to know, if you do dye a garment with the peels of Shemitah produce, and it must be set afire and not be used for benefit, we're saying that the appearance of the dye is considered something substantial. Otherwise, why would you have to set it alight? We couldn't prove it with the ola because it was prohibited for benefit. But here we might be saying that there is dye that you can use that's from a perennial plant. So the Gemara rejects the proof as well, because in the case of Shemitah produce, it is different. Because it goes back to the pasuk and it says it shall be. It uses the term it shall be. Implying it has to remain as it is. In other words, the sanctity shall remain in effect, even if it's used afterwards for dye. So the verse basically teaches, how does it go? It says in Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 25, verse 12, and it reads, for it is the Yovel year, it shall be holy for you. And it applies obviously not only to the Jubilee year, but to Shemitah as well. And it includes the requirement of bi'ur, which is removal, and that remains in effect after the produce itself no longer actually exists, and only its appearance remains. So what we are saying is that if the appearance remains on the clothing, but you've gotten rid of the plant itself, that in itself is a problem because of the permanence. So that's not necessarily a proof in terms of anything other than the fact that it's prohibited. It doesn't mean that the dye itself is substantial. It means that you prohibit it from getting benefit. So that's not a proof either. We start with the same issue as the Ola offering. The Ola produce. So Rava notes a contradiction, and he said, look, if you've got a garment that was dyed with the peels of Ola fruit, it should be set afire. So evidently, according to Rava, appearance is considered a significant factor. And then if you contrast that with the following Mishnah, in other words, in Ola's chapter 3, verse 2, then saying that there is a contradiction, because he's saying if a quarter log of blood from a corpse was absorbed in the floor of a house, the utensils that are actually in the house at the time of Tameh, and some say the utensils in the house of Tahor. So I think let me just give you a bit of a background, because first we were talking about Ola fruits, then we're talking about Shemitah, now all of a sudden we're talking about corpses and blood, and we're thinking, what? So let me just give you a little bit of a background. So a human corpse transmits tumor through an ohel. Literally, it's a tent. And the corpse and the object are similar, if they're simultaneously under one roof, then when that body dies, whatever's in that tent is going to be infected with impurity. So it's not only true, guys, for the corpse, but even for certain parts of the dismembered corpse. The limb, even the blood that leaves the body has got tumor. And that's in Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 21, verse 11. And it says, upon the souls of any dead person, the Kohen Gadol shall not come. And the term come means what? It means under the roof of the deceased, you shall not come near. That's what it means. So the soul is understood to refer to blood. Because why? If a person has no blood, their soul leaves their body. So that sustains the life of a living creature. Okay? And since that's the case, and that's then the rabbis have said, look, there's a tradition that we've got to work out what the minimum amount of blood is necessary to sustain human life, and that's a quarter of a log of blood. Now, when we say log, we don't obviously mean a tree log. Log is a measurement. So whether you call it an ounce, a quarts, a liter, whatever that equivalent is of a quarter log. I don't know what that ancient liquid measurement would be in milliliters, but apparently when that finally leaves the body can't sustain itself. So by forbidding a Kohen Gadol to enter under one roof with the soul, meaning the quarter log of blood, in other words, enough blood to keep the soul going of the deceased, the verse teaches that that amount of blood transmits corpse tumor through the ohel. So that if you've got a dying let's not say it's a tent even. Let's say you've got it in a cottage and the body dies, and while it's dying, the blood is left, and the body gets buried. You've still got a problem because the blood itself is going to create a certain amount of tumor because it's very much part of the corpse, and any utensils that are in that house are going to be infected. So what happens is we're learning in one case is that it says the utensils in the house are tamei, they're impure. And then there's a different Mishnah that says that utensils in the house are tahor, they're pure. So how can it be? If there's corpse tumor within the blood of the deceased as it was draining out of the deceased, the utensils are either infected, not affected. Well, I think affected is probably true as well, or not. So how can we reconcile this issue with Rava? And the Gemara says, look, the dispute is not difficult. When you're dealing with the case of impurity tamei, it refers to utensils that were in the house originally, when the blood was still liquid, before it was absorbed in the floor. Whereas when you're looking at the later text, it's got the reading tahor, purity, when the utensils came into the house in the end after the blood had been absorbed. Okay? So all it's saying that at the end of the day, if the blood was still on the floor, it transmitted tumor to anything in that area. But if the blood has been absorbed into the floorboard or washed or whatever the case may be, it's not going to create tumor because it was absorbed. So how does this relate to a case of, in other words, what does a quarter log of blood have to do with dying? I don't mean literally dying because that's a pun on the fact that the body died and is called tumor. I'm talking about dying of a fabric. So Kevin would appreciate that pun. So on a serious note, we're saying that if the blood was absorbed in a garment when the person died and it was brought into the house, you've got to know that if the garment can be washed and you can get out that quarter log of blood, whatever the milliliters are enough to sustain human life, and that will come out of it, then the house is impure. But if a quarter of a log of blood would not come out of it, in other words, no matter how much you wash, there's less than a quarter of a log of blood, then the house is pure, because only the blood that can be recovered from the garment is still considered to be blood. And that means that at the end of the day, whatever's left in the garment means that blood is not considered something substantial. Because if that blood was considered something substantial, it would make everything tumor. So we're saying just because the appearance of blood on the garment is still evident doesn't mean it's substantial enough to make tumor, because the remaining blood in the garment isn't enough to have sustained a body. So that's a proof against, because the first proof of the Shemitah and Ola is saying that dyeing a fabric means that it's substantial enough that it would have to be burnt and therefore is a consideration. And here we're saying that the blood left over from the garment, even though the quarter of a log is immaterial. In other words, if you got a quarter of a log of blood out, when you squeeze the liquid out of the shirt, then everything would be tumor. If you couldn't, then it would be tahor, it would be pure. So we're saying, why not add the content of the blood still in the shirt that you couldn't squeeze out with the blood that you squeezed out, and together if they make 1/4 log of blood, the whole house is impure. We're saying because the blood left in the garment is not substantial. It doesn't count for anything. And therefore, this is a proof against the fact that dyeing a fabric creates anything substantial to the fabric, okay? And the one thing that we want to know is, is the house pure? Is the house impure? So the Gemara resolves the contradiction. What is it? Is that Rav Kahana said when the Mishnah teaches that one of the leniencies appear to be less stringent quarter logs, that the Mishnah speaks of tavusa blood, which is able to transmit tumor within the roof only under rabbinical law. Therefore, the rabbis were lenient with this tumor. It did not apply to the mere appearance of blood. Okay, so Rav Kahana is saying that in general, the appearance of an object is considered to be something substantial. That's why, according to Rav Kahana, it can't be used as a proof. So that blood that clearly flowed after the death, which is biblically able to transmit tumor via roof, would transmit this tumor even if a quarter of a log of blood couldn't be washed out of the garment. Okay, and it's the same with the garment that was dyed with the peels of the olive fruit. It would have to be burnt. But this is the key point. Tevusa blood means that there's a quarter of a log of blood that flowed from a wounded person as he died. So nobody knows when, at the point of where he died, whether or not that blood was tahor, pure, because if he was alive and it leaked, still pure, or whether at the point of his death, how much leaked, and therefore that's tumah. So therefore that's not biblical. There's a rabbinic stringency that, there's a rabbinic stringency that it would make everything tumah, but according to the biblical side, it wouldn't be. So therefore, the blood that's on the garment left is what you call questionable blood. We don't even know if it's tumah or not. So if a person was dead and then his wound opened up and you got less than a quarter of a log of blood out of the garment, and the rest of the garment you couldn't squeeze out, but there might have been enough blood there that to combine with the squeezed out blood and on the garment put a quarter of a log of blood, then rabbinically it would be tumah, but biblically not. But if the person died for sure, and that blood leaked out of him and was absorbed by the garment, and when you squeezed out the blood and you added that to the garment, that for sure would be prohibited, even rabbinically, because it's not a question of if that's tumah blood or not, because it's not the tevusa stage of a person's alive or if they're dead. Is the blood tahor? Is it tumah? Is it pure? Is it impure? If it's from a dead body, you would add the combined factor of the appearance of blood and the weight of that, the amount of milliliters of the blood on the garment with the squeezed out blood, and if it equaled 1 log of blood, it would be tumah. So according to Rav Kahana, it's only a rabbinical, it's only a leniency, according to him, if we don't make everything tumah, but that it's not a proof that the appearance of blood is not substantial, or the dyeing of a fabric is not substantial, just because we don't count the blood on the garment. The only reason why we don't count the blood on the garment, we're not sure if it was impure, pure, because the person died, we don't know whether the blood leaked out before he died or after he died. Get what I'm saying, guys?
Yeah. Can I just ask you a quick question? Is it impure only to Kohanim or to all Jews?
No, so the Kohen for sure can't even go in that area, but to all Jews,
Is this still impure to them as well?
You have a paraduma, which today we're all infected with the impurity of touching a dead body or being in the confines of a dead body. But to a Kohen, he's not allowed to even have that impurity at all, even today. But we don't have a paraduma, but we're affected by it.
So if you touch a dead body, you also get infected.
Absolutely.
All right.
But a Kohen,
only a Jewish person, Gavin. The only applies to Jews.
Yeah. Well, Damon is Jewish. I said you, so Damon is Jewish. Aren't you, Damon? Okay, carry on.
Yes, Kev. By the way, there's an argument. We learned this in Bava Kamma when we killed one of the enemy tribes, that the bodies were tumah, even though they were not Jewish.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we learned that when we were learning about a vessel. Do you remember in Bava Kamma? They were not Jewish. We brought up this whole subject.
Yeah, I actually do remember. We've been through this. I actually do remember this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not the same level, but it's for sure. I'll try.
Yeah, because it came up whether Cohen can go to the cemetery, like a non-Jewish cemetery, and in theory better not.
Don't you remember, guys? It came up at the stage where a person had a seminal emission, and he was on somebody's couch, and then it went into the fact of what happens if there was corpse tumor, because we killed the enemies of Israel, and it would affect a container that was in the room of the body.
It's in this week's upcoming parsha, actually.
They were non-Jews that we killed. Guys, I wish the Hart family I wish that they be consoled, and I wish them only simchas. And Darren, I'm so
Amen.
sorry, and obviously Mrs. Hart, I just wish you long life, really.
Amen.
All right, we've got a
Amen,
Gemara
amen.
share.
Shkar, thanks,
Here
Damon.
we go. We got it now.
Okay.
Cheers. Thanks.